The 80s produced some of the best trilogies and sequels ever. I think part of the reason why modern Hollywood fails with this is, of course, the disregard and disrespect towards the source material. For example, nowadays they care more about, having a strong female lead or represent certain ethnic groups. So
But
by the
what the
time
hell,
this
boy?
video was recorded, the Odyssey movie from Christopher Nolan just came into theaters. And I saw a guy on Twitter and he said they casted like an Indian guy to be part of the crew. And then he said that they are basically hiring every kind of ethnic group except for Greeks. And, that's got me kind of thinking. Like many people say, if you have a problem with a black dude in this movie, then you're just a racist. But here's the thing. I'm comparing this movie all the time to the Troy movie from Ridley Scott. And if you really think about it, the design, the way the characters look is part of the visual storytelling. And they somehow managed to have Orlando Bloom as Paris, and then they had this actor for Hector. I don't remember his name, to be honest. But Hector and Paris, they genuinely looked like they could have been brothers. And Orlando Bloom's face was just perfect. He was just perfect for the role because he was kind of like a pretty boy, more scrawny looking version. And then you had Hector, who was his older brother. He was well built. He had like more of a beard going on and everything. He looked like a older, kind of jaded, more responsible version. And then you had like Achilles, who was played by Brad Pitt, who's like in perfect shape, has like long blonde hair, is like basically all the stuff that you're looking for in a mythological hero, basically. Demigod hero. And I'm just thinking, like, I don't think that having an ethnic diverse cast of characters, this doesn't inherently make the movie worse, but to me it just signals that the priority is just at a different place. So if you don't mind looking at fucking Travis Scott during the movie, I guess it's alright, right? Who cares? But I'm just remember thinking like Hollywood proved that they actually can do better than this. And the writing has kind of become less important. The task of writing a sequel or a trilogy is, I think it's inherently a bit paradoxical, because I remember this quite well. The new Denis Villeneuve Dune movie, you had a lot of people who were unsatisfied, and while everyone was in theaters, I was at home reading the books. And so the first book is 800 pages. It's quite a long book. And by the time I got around to watching the movie, part one, I realized that Villeneuve really stopped at the halfway point of the story. And suddenly I understood why everyone was so pissed off. Because it's essentially just half a story. This is a rare example of the sequel paradox, where you have all the setup in the first part. And now the second movie of, Dune Part 2 was actually really, really good. The visuals and the sound design, it was awesome. But many people did not watch this because they were still mad at the first movie. They felt kind of scammed. The first movie didn't feel like a proper movie, like a proper introduction into the franchise. Now, oftentimes the sequel paradox takes shape in a way that you have, for example, a movie which wasn't really supposed to be a part of a trilogy or was supposed to have a sequel. And then the writers basically make up a bunch of shit that doesn't really suit the narrative. It doesn't really make sense. A good example how to write a proper trilogy would be Star Wars or Back to the Future. I think Star Wars did it really well with A New Hope. So that's episode 4. And, they introduced Darth Vader, they introduced Ben Kenobi, and he talked about the Force. You had reckless bounty hunter Han Solo, for example, who only is really selfish and only thinks about himself. So that was the setup of this movie, and the payoff was that Darth Vader was defeated. Luke listened to the Force. He put basically all his chips in, and he trusted the Force fully, which was rewarded by him destroying the Death Star. And Han Solo eventually came around and did the right thing. He helped the Resistance. So the first entry into the franchise. And mind you, like I was born in the 2000s. For me, Star Wars has always been 6 movies. But at that point, the episode 4 was really the first thing that people came in contact with in terms of Star Wars. And the first movie, I gotta say, on its own, it works really well. You could never touch the franchise at that point, and you'd be thinking like, yeah, that's a satisfying conclusion to this movie. So the subsequent movies, episode 5 and 6, The Empire Strikes Back and everything, introduced Palpatine, for example, so this was the master of Vader. But Palpatine wasn't mentioned in the 4th movie, so it wasn't like a loose end that they needed to tie up, and it also didn't really contradict anything that was happening in the first movie. I mean, I always thought it was kind of cheap that, you know, Palpatine had like a second Death Star, but at the end of the day, if audiences knew in episode 4 about the second Death Star, it would be like, it would have felt like a loose end, like the movie's not really over. But George Lucas actually tied the story up pretty well. And I think the same thing was really happening with Back to the Future. Because it's not just magic systems and elements of the world, but it's also in terms of character arcs. Character arcs also have a setup and a payoff. And I think what they did really interestingly in the first Back to the Future movie, that the main character, Marty McFly, actually doesn't have a character arc at all. He stays static throughout the whole movie. And the one character who actually has an arc of his own is his father. But the father kind of becomes more like the son, so he starts to grab life by the balls, and at the end of the movie this is actually being rewarded because Marty travels back to his time and he sees that his father is doing much better in life and he's much more successful, his family is much happier and overall in a much better place. So his paradigm, Marty's paradigm, was actually the right thing. However, the second and third movie, they are kind of more tied together, because if you're willing to watch the first one and then you're watching the second one, you're probably gonna watch the third one as well. So they had kind of more loose ends at the end of the second movie, but not at the end of the first one, because again, you can't start a franchise like that. But the second and the third movies was actually quite brilliant. What they did is they had Marty go through this arc, because now it's shown that in the third movie there was a picture of his grave, which they kind of utilized to show him that if he keeps up his boisterous attitude, that he will 100% confirm that he will die. This will lead to his demise, especially like in the Wild West, kind of wild times. You know, if you challenge someone's honor, that's basically death sentence. Marty actually did the opposite. He shifted his paradigm basically, and this was actually the right thing for the situation, because that enabled him to survive. That he was like, you know what, I guess I'm a chicken then. I don't care. I don't give a fuck. And he was willing to be the bigger man and just walk away and not protect his damn pride. Not this time.
What if I don't go out there? You're a coward. 6! And you'll be branded a coward for the rest of your days. Everybody, everywhere, will say Clint Eastwood is the biggest yellow belly in the West.
Another good example would be Terminator 1 and 2. The third one is just a stupid cash grab movie. Please don't get me started on the third Terminator movie. That was so god awful. The dialogue was just ridiculous. This was some of the stupidest shit ever.
Where's John Connor?
If I tell you, will you let me go?
Yes.
He's in the kennel, in a cage. You said that you'd let me go.
I lied. It's out the season. John Connor. It is time.
You here to kill me?
But the first and the second movie work really well together, because again, you have in terms of character arcs, you have Sarah Connor, who is at the start of the movie is kind of naive, kind of not really self-sufficient, but then she meets this soldier from the future, and he actually teaches her how to protect herself, how to basically lead a war, because war is everything that Reese had ever known. So he taught her that. And in the second movie, she has this moment where she learns this, and she has a major mindset shift. And in the second movie, this exact behavior is being deconstructed, because in the second movie, they have this T-1000 and they send a T-800, so basically the same model that hunted her a couple of years earlier. They send the T-800 back in time, and now she has to kind of throw everything out of the window and has to learn how to trust others again. And because she does the right thing, this again is being rewarded by the story. She survives. Skynet gets terminated. The T-800 eventually terminates himself in order to save the two. Mind you, a lot of the points that I make about this are in terms of arc structures of the characters and less about the world itself. But I think this goes both ways, really, because like a movie needs a world in which the plot exists, but it also needs characters, and the characters actually drive the plot. They drive the growth. They progress the plot basically. Of course, you have in the Terminator movies, you have, for example, the first movie, the Terminator is destroyed in this kind of factory, and I'm not sure if they show this in the first movie that some part of it was still alive, some part of it was not completely destroyed. And then in the second movie, they use this Terminator, this this piece of technology that they didn't really understand, that was like state-of-the-art Skynet, and they use it as a cornerstone basically to build a new Skynet. And so I guess they kind of also left this potential in terms of the world, but Star Wars also kind of, the fifth part also kind of wiggled his way around this. And I think as long as you have characters, you still have some plot in front of you. And I guess this is all subjective, because I could make a point about why Star Wars Episode 4 worked better than Episode 1, for example. And there will be like some motherfucker in the comment and he says, oh, well, that's not true because, this and that scene. But I think we can collectively agree that as a entry into the franchise, A New Hope works better than The Phantom Menace. And I don't hold it against them. I mean, by the time they were filming, The Phantom Menace, everyone already knew what Star Wars was. Everybody cared about Anakin Skywalker because we knew from these other movies that he would go on to be, the chosen one, the fallen angel, basically, the Darth Vader, the evil overlord. And that's why everybody cared. If you show The Phantom Menace to people who never watched Star Wars, they will be like, what the fuck? What is this? Why do we care about this random slave boy from Tatooine? And why the hell is this pod racer scene so goddamn long? I mean, like, I remember watching this with my girlfriend and she was like, yeah, well, I remember the pod racer scene to be longer. But I mean, if this already stuck in your... I'm going on a rant here. This is already kind of stuck in your head that this is like the longest scene of the movie because it's, kind of a necessary. Yeah, he can fly with this pod racer thing, and later Peter ends up destroying this whole commando fleet station. But again, it's just through the lens of the first time watching these, kind of like, this is just a kid. Why can this kid do all of these crazy things? Later it makes sense when you see, okay, well, he's the chosen one, that's why it's so important, and that's why Palpatine is carefully putting these plans together. But The first 3 movies, I think they're good, but they don't really work as their own movie. It's just 6 hours of piecing stuff together, but it doesn't feel like its own movie. I'm not saying that these movies are bad. They're good. I like them. It was, in a writing sense, it was a flaw. I'm actually not really planning on making this a whole YouTube channel. I'm just a 24-year-old video editor, and I'm looking for a job. I'm actually really interested in writing, and so I figured I'd make my own kind of writing video, kind of get a few things on my chest and show that I understand a little bit about the game. So if you like my editing style and you want to work with me, leave a comment under this video or contact me on my Instagram account.